They say when you're in recovery, the mind gets hazy, pain meds, anesthesia, trauma, it all blurs, but I remember that afternoon with a kind of painful clarity. The television was on mute in my hospital room. Some cooking show, though I couldn't smell anything but bleach and overcooked vegetables. I was propped up in bed, arms stiff with IV tape, wearing one of those pale blue gowns that makes you feel more like a specimen than a person. My back ached, my mouth was dry. But it wasn't the stroke that made my stomach turn. It was the card. A get well card, lavender with a cartoon sun on the front. Hope you're back on your feet soon, it read in big curly font. Inside, Rachel had written, thinking of you. Don't worry about a thing, we've taken care of everything. Rest up. Love, Rachel. There was something else inside. A receipt. I don't think she meant to leave it there. Neiman Marcus, 1514. Neiman Marcus. A leather bag, and something called a statement necklace. I stared at it like it might vanish if I blinked. My savings. That was the only thought in my head. Not the stroke, not the numbness in my fingers, not even the fact that my son, Adam, hadn't visited once in 5 days. Just the pit in my stomach, growing with every second. I buzzed for the nurse, trying to keep my voice calm. A young man named Carlos came in. Sweet boy, always smiled like he meant it. Carlos, could you check something for me? I asked. I think my wallet's missing. He looked confused, but nodded, and opened the drawer in the tiny bedside cabinet. Inside was my purse, zipped closed. He handed it to me. I pretended to fumble, like my hands were still shaky. They weren't. Everything was in its place. Driver's license, insurance card, even my emergency cash. But when I flipped to the back pocket, where I kept my account info, old school, written on a faded note card, my stomach dropped. I kept it there, because I never trusted the cloud. My login, my password, my backup pin. All there, just like Rachel had seen it 2 weeks ago when she helped me sort medical paperwork in the living room. Carlos hovered. Need me to call someone for you? No, I said, smiling. No thank you. Just wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything at home. He nodded and left. I waited until the door clicked shut, then pulled out my phone from the charging port on the side table. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I tapped through to the banking app and tried to log in. Incorrect password. I tried again. Account locked due to multiple failed attempts. I sat back against the stiff pillows, trying to process. Then I reached for my backup option, my old email account. She'd forgotten that one. I used the forgot password feature. The bank sent me a recovery code. When I finally got in, the first number I saw was a 0. Checking. Savings. I stared, refreshed the page, refreshed again. Nothing. I tapped into the transaction history. 2 weeks' worth of debits, furniture stores, high-end boutiques, a $9,000 transfer labeled mortgage principal, spa services, 3 food delivery orders a day under Rachel's name. The final withdrawal was a $42,000 wire marked external account J&R Simmons. Joint account. That was my retirement money, the cushion, my what-if safety net. And she'd vacuumed it out while I was unconscious, while I couldn't move the left side of my face. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just lay back. That moment marked the start of something I didn't have words for yet. Not rage, not betrayal, something deeper, quieter, a cutting stillness. She'd smiled at me when I was wheeled into the ambulance, hand on my shoulder. Don't you worry about a thing, Linda, she'd said. You just focus on getting better. And then she stole everything that mattered. The hospital TV flickered as the sun shifted outside my window. The blinds were half closed, and the light sliced across the sterile floor like a scalpel. I heard a gentle knock, and a hospital social worker stepped in. Young, apologetic, probably used to dealing with confused seniors. Hi, Miss Carter, she said softly. Rachel told us you might want to talk to someone about discharge planning. I stared at her. She mentioned you'll be transitioning home soon. Home. To the house I gave half my savings to help them buy. To the guest room that didn't have a closet. To the couple who just drained every account I had. I forced a smile. That's right, I said. Let's schedule something for tomorrow. I'd like to get my thoughts together. She smiled and nodded. Of course. After she left, I exhaled slowly and looked at the lavender card again. The receipt fluttered to the floor. I bent forward and picked it up. The bag she bought cost more than what I'd spent furnishing my entire kitchen back in '86. I folded the receipt in half and slid it into the book on my side table. The housekeeper and the professor. I hadn't touched it since I got here. I wasn't ready for fiction just yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the speckled ceiling tiles and whispered the same sentence over and over to myself. You are not weak. You are not done. You are not theirs. When you've been a nurse for 41 years, you learn to catalog emotion like symptoms. Shock is quiet. Grief is slow. Rage lives in the body before it shows in the voice. What I felt that second night in the hospital after discovering what Rachel had done wasn't any of those things. It was diagnosis, not of her, of myself. I had allowed this. Not the theft, not the outright betrayal, but the setup. The years of swallowing sarcasm and performing gratitude for things I never asked for. I'd trained them to see me as disposable by making myself so low maintenance, so grateful, so quietly helpful, that the moment I needed something back, they didn't hesitate to treat it like charity. I spent that night sitting upright, pillows stacked behind my back, phone resting on my lap like a loaded weapon. The banking app had updated again, still empty. I checked the linked transactions from the savings account. Every dollar, gone. The little notes Rachel wrote, in the descriptions, didn't even try to hide it. Mortgage catch-up, luxury furnishings, car fund. One line just read, "We deserve it." She used my money and had the audacity to write "we." By 5 a.m., I had a plan. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. I wasn't there. But I needed clarity, and that started with information. I called my old friend Pauline, who worked as a paralegal for a probate attorney in town. "Linda," she said, groggy but alert. "Is everything okay?" "Not exactly," I said. "I need to know if co-signing a down payment gives me any standing on a mortgage." A pause. Then, "What happened?" I told her. Not all of it, but enough. The theft, the transfers, the paper trail, the powerlessness. "Send me everything you have," she said firmly. "I'll talk to Hal when he gets in." I sent screenshots from my phone, PDFs from my email, even a photo of the handwritten ledger I'd kept for decades, showing my deposits into the account Rachel cleaned out. I didn't even realize until then how meticulous I'd been all these years. I was always the responsible one, the careful one. Now it was going to matter. The hospital released me 2 days later. No fanfare, no balloons. Rachel showed up in an oversized beige SUV with an interior that smelled like new leather and something citrusy. "Feeling better?" she chirped, sliding out in big sunglasses and hugging me too tightly for someone who stole from me in my sleep. "I'm getting there," I said. She didn't ask any follow-up questions. In the passenger seat was a designer tote bag, creamy white, gold hardware, the one from the receipt. I stared at it for a moment, then climbed into the back seat. I wasn't ready to sit beside her. The ride home was quiet. She hummed to herself, occasionally checking her lip gloss in the rearview mirror. My son, Adam, wasn't in the car. She offered no explanation, and I didn't ask. He hadn't texted me once since the stroke. That said more than words ever could. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw new patio furniture set up on the front lawn, a modern glass table, 6 ivory chairs with matching cushions, the kind you'd find in a catalog, not in a home like theirs. Like mine. My name was still on the deed. I remembered the day Adam and Rachel signed the purchase paperwork. They were denied their initial mortgage, too much student debt, too little down. I stepped in, liquidated a small IRA I'd been saving quietly, gave them $48,000, enough for the down payment and a cushion. "Mom," Adam had said, eyes wet. "You're saving our future." Rachel had kissed my cheek and whispered, "You'll always have a place with us." I didn't realize at the time that what they meant was, "You're financing the life we want and we'll tolerate you until the payments stop." Inside, the house had changed. New curtains, a massive flat screen on the wall. The guest room had fresh sheets, a different chair, and all my framed photos were gone. "Thought we'd refresh the place while you were gone," Rachel said, standing in the doorway behind me. "Hope you like it." I turned to her. "Where are my things?" "In storage," she said quickly. "Don't worry. safe and sound. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at my knees. And the joint account? She blinked. What? I saw the transfers. I know where the money went. Her lips parted, then closed again. I watched the gears shift behind her eyes. Then she smiled. Not a real one, but a smooth customer service expression that looked like it was practiced in a mirror. Linda, I think you're still recovering. We talked about this. You said we could use the funds. I said no such thing. I cut in. She laughed lightly. Well, Adam said you agreed. I didn't. Silence. Real, weighted silence. Then she shrugged. You know what? Let's talk about this another time. You need rest. She walked out without waiting for my reply. Her heels clicked across the hallway, confident as ever. I lay back on the stiff mattress and stared at the ceiling. Then I pulled out my phone and opened a new Day 1. Returned home. Confirmed room rearranged. Missing personal items. Rachel deflected when confronted. No apology. Adam. Absent. I spent the next few days moving in shadows, listening, watching, collecting. Rachel talked loudly on the phone. I learned they'd refinanced the house. Possibly without telling the bank, I was a partial owner. Adam worked longer hours. The kids, my grandkids, barely said a word to me. Not cruel, just distant. Like I was a houseplant they had to water out of obligation. One night, I overheard Rachel on a call. I was in the hallway, lights off, carpet soft beneath my feet. She's fine. No clue, she said. Then, laughing, honestly, I didn't think it would be this easy. That was the moment I knew. Not just that they didn't care, but that they assumed I wouldn't fight. They'd mistaken my silence for surrender. And that was their mistake. I began to play the part they wanted. Quiet, fragile, and clueless. In the morning, I made myself useful. I folded towels that were already folded. I asked Rachel how to use the new coffee maker, even though I'd read the manual tucked behind it. I let her speak over me, correct me, coo at me, like a child who needed managing. That's what she wanted, a harmless, unthreatening woman she could usher toward irrelevance. I gave her that version. I gave it to her while I cataloged receipts in a burner email account, one that no longer had my full name on it. Linda became L. I uploaded every bank statement I could find. I scanned Rachel's printed mortgage documents when she wasn't home. The new filing cabinet in Adam's office had a cheap lock. I'd worked night shifts, in trauma wards. I wasn't going to be foiled by a piece of office supply plastic. The more I read, the clearer it became. Rachel hadn't just borrowed from me. She had structured her entire financial future under the assumption I would die quietly. Their refinance deal only worked because my name was still on the deed, and I wasn't flagged as a legal threat. The bank considered me a co-signer, not a co-owner. She was gambling. I wouldn't push back, which meant I couldn't make noise. Not yet. So I watched and waited. One morning, Rachel knocked on the door of my room, which she never did before entering, and leaned in with her usual sugary tone. We're going to Tahoe next week, she said, bright and businesslike. Just for 3 days. A little reset. The kids will stay with my sister. I nodded. That sounds nice. Is Adam taking off work? She hesitated. He needs it. You know how stressed he's been. I didn't answer. Would you be okay here alone? You're not cleared to drive yet, right? Oh, manage, I said, keeping my voice soft. She smiled wider, like she was speaking to a well-behaved dog. You're the best. That night, I took the keys to her office, filing cabinet, and moved everything into a locked case I bought off Craigslist. Cash only. I hid it beneath the loose floorboard in the laundry room, underneath the old hamper where Rachel kept her forgotten donation bins. By the time they left, my inventory was complete. Mortgage contracts. My original $48,000 transfer receipt. The email from the title company showing my name as co-borrower. Copies of Rachel's transfers out of my account. A flash drive, with all the screenshots. I had everything except the final piece. The title deed. I waited 2 days after they left. Just enough time to let the illusion settle that I was helpless, grounded, waiting quietly for their return. Then I called Pauline again. Elle, she said, catching on to my new alias. I've got news. I turned on the recorder app on my burner phone. Hal found it, she continued. The original deed. You're listed as co-owner with survivorship rights. That means if something happens to Adam, or the mortgage defaults, you can claim majority interest. I leaned forward in the kitchen chair, hand braced against the cold tile of the counter. Can they remove me without consent? Not legally, she said. But it looks like they tried. There's a form filed with the county clerk a few months ago requesting your removal, but the signature they used? She paused. It doesn't match any of the samples we submitted. I closed my eyes. They forged it, I said. Looks that way. We're sending a certified inquiry to the bank. That will pause any further action on their end. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. And Linda, she added, you have enough here for a full civil suit. Possibly criminal charges. I swallowed. Let's start quietly. No scorched earth. Understood. I hung up and let the silence return. The dishwasher was humming. The sun was streaming through the kitchen window, catching flecks of dust in midair. The home they thought they owned, every inch of it, was about to be reassigned. Not out of revenge, out of correction. The day they returned, Rachel burst into the kitchen in a flurry of bags and branded sunglasses. She dyed her hair, subtly, lighter at the ends, and wore a sweatshirt that said "Blessed beyond measure." The irony nearly made me "We're back," she sang. I smiled, without showing teeth. How was Tahoe? Oh, divine, she said, unloading herbal tea bags and organic protein bars from her carry-on. You'd love it. Adam played golf every day. Adam walked in behind her, looking sunburnt and half ashamed. His eyes flicked to mine, then dropped. Hi, Mom, he muttered. Hello, Adam. He nodded, brushing past me toward the stairs. Not a hug, not a question about how I'd fared alone, just silence and distance. Rachel poured herself a glass of sparkling water. We brought you back some lavender lotion, she said, holding it out like a prize at a fair. Thank you, I replied, setting it down without touching it. She watched me a second too long. Everything okay while we were gone? Just fine. She tilted her head. You sure? I met her gaze. My voice didn't rise. I'm sure. Then I turned and walked to my room, leaving her to wonder whether my answer was truth or threat. It was both. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Rachel, not even to Adam, to myself. I wrote, they underestimated me because I didn't shout, because I didn't slam doors. But a woman doesn't need to scream to pull a foundation out from under you. She just needs patience, proof, and a pen. And I had all three. People think power is loud. But the truth is, real power is quiet. It doesn't need to bark, it doesn't threaten. It just moves, steadily, while others talk themselves into blindness. I moved quietly. Over the next week, I resumed routines. Rachel assumed were meant to keep me busy. I watered the plants, wiped fingerprints off her new marble island, and folded laundry no one asked me to. But while I scrubbed countertops, I counted doors, vents, locks. I took inventory of every key, every safe, every place they thought was secure. My mind moved like it did in my nursing days. Clinical, methodical. I waited until Thursday morning to leave the house. Rachel was gone at yoga, Adam at work. I walked 3 blocks to the nearest bus stop, my tote bag heavier than it looked. Inside were the flash drive, copies of every financial record, and the deed showing me as co-owner. I'd called ahead to Hal's office. Pauline said he could see me at 10 sharp. The law office was tucked between a vacant bank branch and a dental clinic. I walked in and the air conditioning hit like a slap, sterile and cold. The receptionist greeted me by name and offered me water. I declined. Hal was a man in his 60s, with a buzz cut and fingers that looked too big for the pen he held. Miss Carter, he said, standing. Call me Linda, I replied, shaking his hand. He motioned to the chair across from his desk. Let's talk about what you want to do. I sat. I want control of my share of that house, I said. And I want them to know I could take the rest if I chose to. His eyebrows lifted, just slightly. And I want it done quietly. I'm not looking to ruin them, just remove the illusion they're in charge. He leaned back, nodding. That's doable, especially with this paperwork. He glanced through the copies I'd brought. They filed a forged quitclaim attempt. I can report that to the clerk's office. We'll freeze any pending real estate activity. And if you want, we can issue a formal letter of ownership assertion. I want it mailed certified to both of them, I said. Separate copies, and I want a third sent to their lender. He smiled, more impressed than amused. Done. And I'd like a trust prepared for a new property. His eyes flicked up. You're moving? No, I said, sliding a separate folder across the table. I'm buying them out. He opened a folder. Inside were my bank statements. New ones, from an account Adam and Rachel didn't know existed. My emergency fund, my pension savings, a small inheritance from my sister that I'd never told anyone about. Hal exhaled. Well, he said, that changes the board. I returned home before lunch. Rachel was in the kitchen, blending something green, her leggings patterned like peacock feathers. She looked up when I walked in. Morning, you were out? I smiled mildly. Just a walk. You're looking spry, she said, with forced cheer. Feeling better? Some days more than others, I replied, and left it at that. Later that afternoon, Adam came home early. His car pulled into the driveway with a crunch of gravel. He walked in, loosened his tie, and looked vaguely surprised to see me in the living room. Hey, Mom! Hello, Adam. He hesitated. You okay? Why wouldn't I be? He scratched the back of his neck. Just asking. I closed the book in my lap. What time do you and Rachel usually get the mail? He blinked. Around 4. Why? Just wondering. At precisely 4:12 p.m., Rachel screamed from the front hallway. Adam and I both turned as she stomped into the kitchen, a white envelope in one hand, her face flushed with color. She waved the letter like it had bitten her. What is this? She snapped. Adam took the envelope. Read. Went pale. He looked at me across the room. You? I stood slowly. It's a formal notification of ownership interest. From my lawyer. You blindsided us, Rachel hissed. We were handling everything. Without me, I said. Using money I never gave you permission to touch. Her mouth opened, but I held up a hand. I'm not taking the house, I said calmly. I'm buying it. Rachel blinked. You what? I made an offer to the bank this morning, cash. Adam stepped forward. Mom? Come on. That's not why. You're both drowning in debt, I said. This house is leveraged to its hinges. I'm removing the burden. Think of it as an act of grace. Rachel's voice cracked. This is our home. And you thought it could be mine when you needed my savings, I said. Now it is. That evening, Rachel locked herself in the master bedroom. Adam sat on the back porch with a beer and said nothing while the kids watched TV with the volume too high. I sat in the guest room, notebook in my lap. Day 14. Line drawn. It wasn't vengeance I felt. It was peace. Not the soft kind. The cold, earned kind. The kind that comes when you finally stop being afraid of what people will think if you stop making yourself smaller. I was done shrinking. The next morning, Rachel cooked breakfast. Not ordered. Not reheated. She actually cooked. Scrambled eggs, toasted brioche, slices of avocado fanned out like she'd copied them from a cooking blog. Adam set the table in silence while the kids hovered in doorways, unsure if they were allowed to be normal. The air in the kitchen felt artificially sweet, like it had been sprayed down with apology-scented Febreze. I took a seat at the end of the table, where the old man of the house used to sit. The irony was not lost on me. Rachel placed a plate in front of me like it was an offering. Figured we could use a fresh start, she said with a practiced smile. Sure, I replied. Let's see how it tastes. Her lips twitched. She sat across from me, still holding her fork as if unsure where to begin. Adam cleared his throat. So, what exactly happens now? I sipped my coffee. I'll assume the loan. Pay off the remaining balance. Title transfers into a trust. You're welcome to rent from me until you find something else. Standard lease. Fair market value. Rachel blinked. You're evicting us? I'm offering stability, I said. Something you gambled away when you used my savings without permission. Her face hardened. You're doing this to punish us. No, I said. I'm doing this so you never mistake my silence for permission again. She set her fork down. This isn't fair. I looked at her, not with cruelty, but clarity. You stole from me while I was unconscious. You turned my money into furniture and a weekend getaway. You cleaned out my accounts to prop up a lifestyle you couldn't afford. Rachel crossed her arms. We were struggling. You don't know what it's like to raise a family right now. My gaze didn't waver. Then you should have asked. Instead, you lied. You maneuvered. I didn't lie. You forged my name on a quitclaim deed. The room went still. Even Adam stopped chewing. I stood. Enjoy breakfast. And I walked out, plate untouched. The next few days passed, like a slow unraveling. Rachel oscillated between cold civility and emotional outbursts. One minute she was thanking me for dinner. The next, she slammed doors so hard, the walls shook. Adam, to his credit, tried to play diplomat, but he was lost, too guilt-ridden to defend her, too weak to defend me. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I spent my evenings in the guest room, with a lamp and a legal pad. I drafted a list of everything I had poured into that home, not just the financials, but the invisible investments. Hours spent babysitting, meals made, holidays carried, the late nights, when their son had the flu and they were too tired to stay up. Every time I'd folded a burden into my lap, just to make their lives smoother. I wasn't collecting ammunition. I was building memory, because Rachel would rewrite this story for others. I could already hear her saying it at brunch tables and hair salons. We opened our home to her, and she took it from us. She'd flatten the facts, turn herself into the victim, paint me bitter, vengeful. But the truth was, she forgot I taught her grace. 3 days later, a knock came on my bedroom door. I opened it to find Emma, my youngest granddaughter, holding a small folded blanket in her arms. "Grandma, can you fix this?" It was a pink fleece quilt I'd made for her when she was 5, the year she started having night terrors. One corner had frayed, the stitching loosened. I nodded. "Of course, sweetheart." She hesitated. "Mom said not to bother you." "Your mom's a little upset right now," I said gently, "but you can always bother me." She smiled and came inside. I pulled my sewing kit from the dresser, the same one I'd used since nursing school. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, legs swinging. "I like it when it's quiet," she said. "Mom's been yelling a lot." I didn't respond, just kept stitching. "Are you mad at her?" she asked. I paused, looked into those big, questioning eyes. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm not afraid of her anymore." She nodded like she understood more than a child should. Then, after a moment, she said, "Will you still come to my birthday?" I smiled. "You'll have to ask your new landlord." She grinned and reached for my hand. For a few minutes we just sat there, grandmother and granddaughter, mending what was frayed, one thread at a time. That night, Rachel didn't speak to me. She made dinner for herself and Adam, let the kids eat in the den, and left me off the plate count entirely. I made my own tea, boiled eggs, ate in the laundry room, on top of the dryer, where it was warm and still. I wrote again before bed. Day 21. She's starting to understand silence isn't weakness, it's restraint, and I don't owe her my restraint anymore. The following morning, a manila envelope arrived by courier. Rachel was still in her robe when she signed for it. I knew what it was, the official filing from Hal's office finalizing the title transfer into my trust. She stood frozen in the foyer, holding the envelope like it was radioactive. I passed her on my way to the porch. "You might want to read that," I said. "It's the last page of the story you started writing without me." She didn't follow me. I stepped outside into the sunlight, coffee in hand, breath finally steady. For the first time in weeks, I sat in the patio chair, not as a guest, but as the owner. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. No tossing, no phantom beeps from hospital monitors in my dreams. Just the slow rhythm of my breath and the comforting weight of finality. When I opened my eyes that morning, the room felt warmer. Not because the thermostat was different, but because the power dynamic was. The envelope Rachel had signed for still sat unopened on the entryway table. By mid-morning, I heard the hush of whispered arguing behind the closed bedroom door. Rachel's voice, frantic and sharp. Adam's, quiet and defensive. At one point, I heard a drawer slam and something drop with a thud, maybe a suitcase. I didn't go to investigate. They needed to sit in the discomfort. I had done it for long enough. I took my coffee outside and let the birds do the talking. The garden, which had been mostly Rachel's neglected pet project, was starting to bloom again. I trimmed the hydrangeas myself 2 weeks earlier when she was on a video call, too distracted to notice. I took a strange satisfaction in their quiet regrowth. They didn't need drama, they just needed space and a little water. I understood that now, because I was one of them, and I had bloomed under pressure too. By noon, Adam emerged from their room. His face looked drawn, like a man who hadn't slept, which I imagined was true. He found me in the kitchen, cutting up fruit. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and gestured toward the table. "Sit." He did, shoulders hunched like a child waiting for scolding. "I didn't know," he said, "about the account, about the deed." I believed him, but that didn't excuse him. "You didn't ask either," I said. "You trusted Rachel with things that weren't hers, and you let her speak for me long before the money disappeared." He looked up. "I thought you were okay with how things were." "That's the problem, Adam. You only ever thought about whether it was convenient for you, not whether it was fair to me." He swallowed. "So what now? You're welcome to stay, but things will be different. Boundaries, rent, shared responsibilities." He nodded slowly. "And Rachel?" He hesitated. "She's furious." "I know. She says you're manipulating us." I gave a sad smile. "That's funny, because I finally stopped letting myself be manipulated." He stared at the countertop. "Do you hate us?" "No," I said, "but I don't trust you either. Not yet." That afternoon, Rachel finally cracked. She came into the kitchen while I was folding towels, my task of choice when I needed stillness. "You've made your point," she snapped. I didn't look up. I wasn't making one. She scoffed. "Oh please, you humiliated me. You embarrassed my family." "You embarrassed yourself," I said calmly. "I just gave you the mirror." She stepped closer. "You don't get to lecture me. You're not perfect." I set the towel down and looked her in the eye. "I never claimed to be, but I didn't steal. And I didn't pretend kindness while planning betrayal." She blinked hard. Her lip trembled, just slightly. Then she stormed out. I stood there for a long time afterward, one hand still gripping the towel. Not angry, not vindicated, just tired. Because winning still costs something. And even when you're right, it can hurt to watch the people you loved reveal they never saw you clearly. Later that night, Emma crept into my room again. She didn't ask to sit, just curled up next to me on the bed, blanket clutched under her chin. "I don't like it when they fight," she whispered. I smoothed her hair back. "Me neither." "Is it my fault?" she asked. The question sliced through me like ice. "No, sweetheart. Not even close." She blinked at me. "But Mommy says it all changed because of you." I closed my eyes. "That part is true, but not in the way she means." I didn't explain further. Not because she wouldn't understand, but because she shouldn't have to. Children shouldn't carry the weight of their parents' broken choices. I held her until she fell asleep. Then I carefully carried her back to her bed and pulled the quilt over her small shoulders. In the hallway, I stood for a long moment, staring at the closed door of Rachel and Adam's room. It felt like a board, one I had finally stepped across. By Friday, things were civil, if cold. Adam washed dishes without being asked. Rachel busied herself with errands that may or may not have existed. I didn't question it. That morning, I went to the county clerk's office and filed the final paperwork confirming the trust. It was mine now, legally, quietly, irrevocably. And yet, there was no celebration, no moment of applause. Just a quiet line crossed. The end of the page. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, I sat alone in the backyard with my notebook. Day 25. She thought she'd buried me, but she didn't know I was a seed, and I had finally broken through the dirt. On the first of the month, I printed a lease agreement. It wasn't extravagant, just 2 pages, one for each of them to sign. I left it on the kitchen table with a small dish of pens and a yellow sticky note that read, "Due by Friday, no late fees yet." I didn't expect them to thank me, but I did expect them to understand. The era of favors was over. This was business now, and I'd lived long enough to learn how dangerous it is to mix love with obligation. Rachel didn't come down that morning. Adam wandered into the kitchen, poured himself black coffee, and stared at the papers like they were in another language. He didn't speak until he'd downed half the mug. "Are we really doing this?" I turned from the sink. "We already did. This is the part where we all get honest about what things cost." He ran a hand through his hair. "You know we're stretched." I raised an eyebrow. "I also know you just renewed a gym membership you don't use and paid $400 for new golf shoes." He blinked. "I saw the receipts. I added. You left the email open. He set the mug down with a quiet clink. You're keeping score? No, I said gently. I'm keeping records, because if I don't, no one else will. He didn't argue, just took the lease and walked out. By Thursday, neither of them had signed. I didn't bring it up. I'd already begun contacting rental agencies in the area. The housing market wasn't ideal, but it wasn't my responsibility to shelter grown adults, unwilling to acknowledge what they owed. That night, Rachel tried a new tactic. Nostalgia. She made her special lasagna extra ricotta the way Adam liked it. She even pulled out my old place setting, the one with faded floral trim, and lit a candle in the center of the table. You remember when we used to do Sunday dinners? She asked sweetly. Just us? I took a slow bite. You mean before or after you drained my savings? Her face flickered, but she held the smile. People make mistakes, Linda. Yes, I agreed. Some admit them, some repeat them. Her voice dropped. Do you want to destroy us? I set my fork down. If I wanted to destroy you, you wouldn't be sitting at my table. You'd be in court. Adam stayed silent the entire meal. When it was over, he collected the plates and said nothing. As he rinsed them, the silence between us all had taken on a different shape. Less Cold War, more quiet redefinition. On Friday morning, the lease was signed. Both pages, both signatures. They left it on the table like a peace offering. I picked it up, scanned the lines, and filed it in the folder I kept locked in my room. I wasn't joyful. I wasn't triumphant. I was tired. That afternoon, I got a call from Pauline. Linda, the trust is officially registered, she said. You've got legal standing as sole property owner. It's done. Thank you, I said. There's one more thing. The bank sent a statement to the original address. Yours. Looks like Rachel's been missing payments on a joint card for months. Your name's still on it. I closed my eyes. How bad? About $6,000 in overdue balance. Interest climbing. I pressed my fingers to my temple. Can we cut it off? I'll draft a formal severance letter and send it by Monday. I hung up and stared at the table. They were still bleeding me dry, even now, even after everything. That night, I waited until the kids had gone to bed. I knocked on their bedroom door, holding the statement in my hand. Rachel opened it, her eyes narrowed. You forgot this, I said, handing it over. She unfolded the paper, her face dropped. I thought that card was closed? It wasn't. Adam appeared behind her. We didn't use it on purpose. Your intentions don't matter anymore, I said. What matters is the trail, and this one leads back to me. Rachel opened her mouth, then shut it again. I nodded. Don't worry, it's being closed Monday. You'll be liable for the balance. She stepped back as if I'd struck her. You're cutting us off. I should have done it years ago. And I turned and walked back down the hallway, past family photos I no longer recognized, toward the room where I'd learned to sleep with one eye open. The next morning, the kitchen felt different. Not hostile, just empty. No coffee brewing, no clatter of dishes, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sun stretching across cold tile. I sat at the table with my tea and opened my notebook. Day 30. Boundaries are not punishments, they're fences built from hard lessons, and I've run out of wood to spare. The following Monday began with thunder. A real storm, gray clouds pressing low and tight against the roof, wind slicing through the trees in waves. Rain slapped the windows with such urgency, it felt like the house was being reminded. It wasn't invincible. I made coffee, slowly, listening to the sound of it brewing over the steady tap of water against glass. I'd always loved storms, not because they were loud, but because they cleared things, stripped away the buildup, reset the atmosphere. It felt fitting. By 8, I was at the dining table with a folder in front of me. Pauline had overnighted the final closure documents, my name removed from all remaining joint accounts, a severance from any shared liability. It was official. No more tangled finances, no more fallback roles. I was no longer their financial cushion. I was just me, and that was finally enough. Adam came into the room first, his hair still wet from a rushed shower. He paused when he saw me sitting there, then walked past without a word, grabbing a banana from the counter. I waited for Rachel. She came in 10 minutes later, dressed but tense, as if bracing for a confrontation that hadn't even begun. She poured herself coffee and made a show of pretending I wasn't there. I spoke calmly. "We need to talk." She didn't respond, but she did sit. Adam followed. "I received the paperwork this morning," I said. "The accounts are closed. All shared liability is severed." Rachel's lips pursed, but she nodded once. "Fine. There's one more thing." I slid the lease folder across the table again, this time with a new page clipped to the top. "A rent adjustment?" "It's been 30 days, I said. "Market rates changed. Utilities are up. Property taxes have increased since the reassessment." Adam read the line. "You're raising the rent?" "By a small amount, still below market value." Rachel laughed under her breath. "You're unbelievable." I stayed composed. "No, I'm consistent. You just never paid attention before." She stood, fists tight, at her sides. "You're enjoying this. You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said, my voice low. "I think this makes me respected. Or at the very least, unavoidable. You're punishing us like we're your enemies." "I'm protecting myself, which I should have done sooner." Adam looked between us, eyes tired. "How long is this going to go on?" "As long as necessary," I said. "Until trust is rebuilt. Until honesty isn't optional." Rachel shook her head. "You're sick." "No," I replied. "I was sick. You remember that, don't you? When I was lying in a hospital bed and you were emptying my accounts." Her face went white. I gathered the folder and stood. "You have until Friday to accept the adjustment, or you're free to move. I won't stop you." I walked away, not needing to win, just needing to be heard. In the afternoon, the stormlight softened. I stepped onto the porch with my tea, letting the humid air kiss my cheeks. The house felt different now, not like a battlefield, but like a courtroom emptied after the verdict. Still, tense, but cleared of chaos. I wrote in my notebook. Day 34. Power is not about who speaks loudest. It's about who stops being afraid of silence. 2 hours later, Emma came outside and sat beside me. She didn't say anything at first, just looked out at the street, legs tucked under her like a little old woman in a child's body. "Daddy says we might move," she finally said. I kept my voice soft. "You might. Will I still see you?" "Always," I said. "No matter what house I'm in." She nodded and leaned her head against my arm. "I don't want things to change," she whispered. "Sometimes change is what keeps things honest," I replied. "Even if it feels scary." She looked up at me. "Did you used to be scared, Grandma?" "All the time," I smiled. "I just got better at showing my calm instead." She smiled back. And we sat like that until the rain stopped completely and the first bird dared to sing again. That evening, Adam knocked gently on my door. "Can I sit?" I nodded. He lowered himself into the chair across from me and took a deep breath. "I signed the adjustment. Rachel didn't. She's staying with her sister for a few days." "I see. She says she doesn't recognize you anymore." I met his eyes. Maybe she never did. He looked down. "I wish I'd handled things better." "So do I," said, not cruelly. "But you're here now. That counts for something." We sat in silence for a while. Then he asked, "Why didn't you just leave when you woke up from the hospital?" I smiled faintly. "Because I needed to see what you'd do without me. And when I saw it, I made my choice." He nodded, swallowed, then stood. "Thank you for not giving up." I didn't respond, because forgiveness wasn't instant. But he'd finally stopped hiding behind silence, and that was a start. The house grew quiet again. Not because anything had healed, but because there was nothing left to yell about. Rachel's absence cast a peculiar stillness over the place. There was no perfume in the hallway, no sharp clicks of her heels across the floor, no passive-aggressive sighs when the dishwasher wasn't loaded to her standard. It was as though her energy had been the electric hum behind every scene. Now the silence had its own weight. Adam moved through the house, cautiously, as if trying not to disturb a ghost. He and I kept to our own corners. He did the dishes. I wiped the counters. We passed each other like co-workers after a scandal. And Emma, sweet Emma, tiptoed around it all like a child, learning to interpret weather forecasts, checking our faces for signs of thunderstorms. That Thursday morning, I pulled the box out of the closet. It was labeled, "Documents, House Medical." It had been sealed since before my hospitalization, packed in the blur of emergency. I hadn't looked at it since I'd moved back in. I sat on the floor, back to the wall, and opened the flaps. There were bills, discharge summaries, a worn notebook from the year after Harold died, and beneath those folders filled with payment records, wiring receipts, old wills with long-gone signatures. I found the original paperwork from when Adam and I jointly co-signed the down payment 10 years ago. My handwriting still looped wide and sure across the page. There it was, plain as daylight, proof I had helped them build this place from the foundation up. That I had always been more than a houseguest, a co-owner, a co-founder, and, now, the last one standing. I spent the rest of the morning at the kitchen table, sorting and cataloging. I made a ledger, a handwritten one. The old-school kind, with tidy columns and underlines. I recorded everything, dates of payments, childcare contributions, even meals I'd cooked when Rachel had migraines. It wasn't about revenge, it was about memory. Because when people rewrite you out of the narrative, it's easy to start questioning what was ever real. This ledger was my anchor. Adam came home around lunchtime and paused at the doorway. His eyes flicked to the stacks of paper across the table. "What's all that?" "My contribution," I said. "In numbers." He stepped inside, slowly. "Why now?" "Because someday someone will say, I was just bitter. That I overstayed. That I made a mess of things." He swallowed. "You're not bitter." "No," I said softly. "I'm thorough." That afternoon, I went out back and clipped the dead leaves from Rachel's neglected potted herbs. The basil had almost gone to seed. The thyme was dry and brittle. I trimmed them with care, like I used to clip frayed hospital bandages, quietly, without drama, but with deliberate hands. Emma appeared beside me, holding a small notebook. "What's that, sweetheart?" "A story I'm writing," she said. "Can I read it to you?" "Please, do." She sat on the porch step, legs crisscrossed, and began. There was a castle with a garden, and a girl who lived with her grandma. Everyone else left, but the garden still grew, because the grandma knew how to make things bloom again. My throat tightened. "That's a beautiful story," I said. She smiled shyly. "I think it's real." "So do I." The next morning, Rachel returned. She came in through the back door, bags in her hands, chin held high, her eyes scanned the room as if checking for cracks. She didn't greet me. She didn't speak at all. She went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. Adam didn't ask questions. He helped her carry the bags. The air became tight again. But not loud. Something had shifted. She was a shadow of the person who once controlled the temperature in every room. Now she just occupied it. On Sunday, I left a letter on the table. Not legal, not financial, just human. It said, "I don't need you to apologize to make peace, but I do need honesty to build trust. If you ever want to speak like women who've both been wounded and both survived, I'll be in the garden." I signed it with my full name. Linda Carter. Not mom, not grandma, not her, just me. She didn't come that day, or the next. But on Wednesday, I heard the screen door creak. I was planting tomatoes. Rachel stood behind me, silent. She knelt. "Do you want help?" I nodded. "Dig 6 inches, loosen the soil." She did. Neither of us spoke for the next 10 minutes. Then she said, "I saw the ledger." I looked up briefly. "I expected you would. I didn't know it was all that much." "It always was." She wiped her forehead. "Why didn't you say something years ago?" "Because I thought love meant carrying things without counting them." She nodded once, then paused. "I don't know how to come back from this." I looked at her. "Start by staying." It didn't feel like forgiveness. Not the kind you read about in devotionals or hear in tearful therapy breakthroughs. It felt more like a truce, quiet, heavy, unfinished. Rachel hadn't said she was sorry, but she'd come to the garden. And that, I suppose, was. For days after our silent planting session, we moved around each other like people with bruises, aware of every inch of space, careful not to bump what still ached. She started making dinner again. Adam returned to regular hours at work. Emma came home from school with crayon drawings of turtles and constellations and proudly taped them to the fridge. It all looked normal, but I didn't let that fool me. Normal, in this house, had been built on omission. A week later, Rachel asked to talk. She stood at the doorway to the porch, where I was journaling with the help of my reading glasses and a half-empty mug of tea. "Do you have a minute?" I nodded and motioned to the wicker chair across from me. She sat, folding her arms in her lap. The silence between us was neither hostile nor warm, just a waiting room for words. "I've been thinking," she began, "about everything." I let her. "I made mistakes," she said slowly. "Big ones. But I was angry. At everything. At how hard life had gotten. At Adam. At— "Why me?" I asked softly. Her jaw tensed. "Because you were always calm, always had solutions, always right." "That's not a crime." "It felt like one," she whispered. "When I felt small, you looked big. When I felt weak, you looked strong." I set down my pen. "So you took from me?" She didn't flinch. "I needed to feel like I had power." "And did you?" She shook her head. "Not the kind that mattered." That was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years. She wiped a tear quickly with the sleeve of her blouse, then squared her shoulders. "What happens now?" "That depends," I said. "Do you want to keep living here?" "Yes." "Then we need clear terms." She nodded. "Okay." I reached into the side table drawer and pulled out 2 pages, not a lease this time, but a shared responsibility agreement. No legal jargon, just plain rules. She read each line aloud. "Rent is due on the 1st. Shared chores rotate weekly. No financial decisions on behalf of others. No manipulation disguised as hospitality. Truth, even when it's uncomfortable." She exhaled. "This last one is the most important," I said. She reached for the pen. "Can I sign first?" Later that evening, I cooked. Not to be generous, but because I needed to. I needed to remember that nurturing wasn't a transaction, that I could still feed people without feeding resentment. I made vegetable stew, slow, earthy, forgiving. The kind Harold used to call peace in a bowl. The smell filled the kitchen like a warm apology. Emma set the table without being asked. Adam helped slice bread. Rachel watched from the threshold, unsure if she was invited. "Come on," I said. "Everyone eats at the table." And they did. For the first time in a long time, we weren't playing roles. We were just 4 people, chewing slowly, each digesting more than food. That night, I went back to the garden. The soil was damp from the afternoon drizzle, and the tomato sprouts had begun to show signs of life. I knelt in the dirt, fingers tracing new roots. Behind me, I heard footsteps. "I watered them earlier," Rachel said. "I wasn't sure if you had." I looked up. "Thank you." She hesitated. "I read Emma's story." She read it to me. "She thinks you're magic." I smiled. "Children see clearly." Rachel sat beside me in the dirt. Her blouse wasn't garden ready, and her shoes were clearly not meant for soil, but she didn't care. "You're not who I thought you were," she said. "Neither are you." She nodded. "Maybe that's a good thing." When I returned inside, I sat at the kitchen counter and opened my notebook again. Day 41. Some fences don't need tearing down. They just need gates added. Not everyone must stay locked out if they're willing to knock first. I paused, then underlined that last sentence. Twice. The next morning, a letter arrived. Not handwritten, not typed from the desk of a lawyer. It was from the hospital. A survey. "Rate your stay. How did we do? Would you recommend our care?" I nearly laughed. "Would I recommend having your life stripped clean in a sterile room while your family stripped it financially outside of it?" I tossed it in the bin, but something stuck with me. A phrase. "Rate your stay." I turned back to my journal and wrote in large, careful letters, "How would I rate my stay in this life?" The answer wasn't simple. It wasn't a perfect 5-star review. But it was mine to give. And the fact that I could still choose to answer, that was worth something. The house had never been so quiet and full at once. The tension had faded, mostly. It wasn't replaced by love. Not yet, but by a working sort of peace. Rachel and Adam honored the terms. Dishes were washed. Rent was paid on time. Even the garbage went out before I had to ask. The routines were still fresh, a little awkward like new shoes breaking in, but they fit. On Tuesday, I got a call from the hospital billing office. "Just confirming your address and updated insurance details," the woman said. "We noticed some changes were made by someone else while you were admitted, and we're making sure those changes were authorized." I closed my eyes and took a breath. They weren't. Oh, she replied. Would you like to schedule a correction review? Yes. And please send the full printout. I want to see everything that was touched. She agreed. I hung up and sat in the kitchen with my tea gone cold, the sun barely peeking in through the blinds. It had been over a month since I walked back through that door after the hospital, and still I was uncovering damage. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just leave scars, it leaves tasks. The second call came that afternoon, from my old neighbor Gladys. Linda, she said, I heard what happened with your family. You know how word gets around. I braced myself for judgment, but her voice stayed soft. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I almost dropped the phone. Proud? I asked. Oh, honey, we've all seen the way they walked over you. You were the quiet one, the helper. But now, she chuckled, you're the storm. I laughed, despite myself. I don't feel like a storm. You don't have to. Sometimes being the sky is enough. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with Emma. She was coloring a picture of the house, complete with her dog-eared crayons and that wonderful crooked perspective children have. The windows were purple, and the garden was twice the size it really was. What's that? I asked, pointing at a figure on the porch. That's you, she beamed. And what am I doing? Sitting, she said simply, like always. Like always? You're always watching, she said, but not in a scary way, in a safe way. That nearly undid me. Out of the mouths of children come the truth we don't dare speak ourselves. The third call came just before dinner. It was from Adam. He was calling from his car, just parked outside. Hey, he said. I'm not sure how to say this, so I'll just say it. Go ahead. I got offered a job. In Denver. A good one. A fresh start kind of thing. I stayed quiet. We'd move by the end of the month if I accept. We meaning? Rachel, Emma, and me. I exhaled through my nose. Not in anger. Just adjusting. I haven't signed anything yet, he added quickly. We wanted to tell you first, see how you felt. How I feel? I repeated. You mean whether I'd fall apart? His silence said everything. I won't, I said. You should go. If it's a good thing for you, take it. And you? I've got roots here, and quiet, and tomatoes to raise. He let out a breath of relief. I thought you'd be angry. No, I replied. I think it's time. Dinner was quiet, but not tense. Rachel looked at me, a few times, unsure how much I knew. Adam kept his eyes on his plate. Emma chatted about a lizard she saw on the fence. I let her talk, clinging to that simple rhythm of her voice before it changed zip codes. Afterward, I walked into my room and opened the notebook again. Day 45. Letting go isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's a release. Sometimes it's the space you need to finally become yourself. I paused. Then I wrote. And sometimes, it's the only way to love someone without losing yourself again. The next morning, I made breakfast. Not as a gesture, just as a rhythm. Pancakes, turkey bacon, orange juice, cold and pulpy the way Emma liked it. They came down late. Emma clapped when she saw the plates. Are we celebrating? She asked. No, baby, I said. We're remembering. Rachel sat slowly. You know, I nodded. We weren't trying to spring it on you. You didn't. I said, you gave me more warning than you gave me before my hospital stay. That's progress. She blinked, then smiled, despite herself. We're not running, she said. I know. Adam took a seat. We'd like to visit. Fly you out. Maybe twice a year. I'd like that. And we'd like to give you something before we go. He pulled out a small envelope. I opened it. A cashier's check. That's a lot of zeros, I said, startled. It's what we took, Rachel said. Plus interest. I looked up. She met my gaze fully. It doesn't erase it, she added. But maybe it balances something. I folded the check and placed it in the center of the table. You know what I want? They waited. I want you to leave without guilt and arrive in Denver with grace. That's the only balance I need. I always thought I'd dread the day the house was quiet for real. But as I stood at the window, watching the moving van pull out of the driveway, I didn't feel dread. I didn't feel triumph either. I felt space, raw, unfiltered space, stretching out like a blank page. Emma had pressed a crayon drawing into my palm before she climbed into the car. It was the house again, but this time it had a rainbow over it and a little speech bubble floating from the porch. "I'll wait for you," I whispered back. "I'll be here," though the glass between us caught the words and kept them for itself. Then they were gone. Just like that. No parade, no sharp goodbye, just the rustle of boxes and the hum of tires on asphalt. I didn't cry. Instead, I stripped the beds. I vacuumed under the couches. I wiped down the baseboards, something Rachel never had patience for. I even sorted through the spices, throwing out the duplicates and dried up relics. By afternoon, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and unspoken memories. I walked into what had been Emma's room and sat on the edge of her small twin bed. The pink unicorn sheets were still on, and her nightlight still sat plugged into the socket, even though she never used it. I closed my eyes and inhaled. There was a kind of softness in the stillness. It didn't scream. It didn't ache. It just existed. A waiting kind of silence. I picked up her stuffed rabbit and held it for a moment longer than I meant to. Then I placed it gently in the center of the bed, smoothed the blanket around it, and turned off the light. I walked down the hallway next, passing the door that had once been Adam and Rachel's. It was closed now. A final act of respect? Or just forgetfulness? I turned the knob and stepped inside. The bed was gone. The closet cleared. The walls had faint outlines where picture frames had once hung, memories stripped bare by command hooks and calendar nails. The smell of their shampoo still lingered faintly, like the echo of a song. I stood in the center of the room and turned slowly, taking it in. This space had held arguments, whispered late-night plans, betrayal, beginnings, ends, and now it held nothing. It was the emptiest room in the house. I whispered to it, "You don't owe them anything anymore." And for the first time since I'd returned from the hospital, I believed that I didn't either. I spent the next few days turning routines into rituals. Mornings were for journaling and walks. Midday was for tending the garden. Evenings were for cooking only what I craved. I made lentil soup. I watched an old comedy. I danced a little in the kitchen when no one was watching. I called Pauline, my lawyer, and asked if she could come by to help revise my will. She chuckled. "You've been updating that thing more than your Netflix password." "I've earned the right to keep evolving," I told her. "Fair enough. I'll bring the good pen." She came by on Friday. We sat at the kitchen table, and I poured us both mint tea. I handed her the envelope Rachel and Adam had given me, the cashier's check, untouched. "I want this split between two causes," I said. "One half for the hospital volunteer hospice program, the other to fund a small local scholarship for older women going back to school." Pauline arched an eyebrow. "No trust fund for Emma? She'll get something else," I said. "But this money has a different story. I want it rewritten." She nodded, understanding. We spent the next hour drafting updates. I added a clause that gifted Emma the house if she chose to return one day. Not her parents, just her. "She's the only one who never lied to me," I said softly. Pauline patted my hand. "That kind of clarity is gold." After she left, I stood in the hallway again, staring down its length, like a woman at the end of a long hospital corridor. I walked into the master bedroom, my room now, truly, and opened the window. The garden below rustled in the breeze. I saw two birds flitting near the tomato cage, as if inspecting my work. I smiled. "You never really own a garden. You just borrow it for a while, nurture it, watch it leave pieces of itself in every hand that touches it, much like a family." That evening, I made something new. Lemon orzo with roasted squash and a side of asparagus. I ate it at the table alone, with a jazz record playing low in the background. I didn't set extra plates. I didn't apologize for eating slowly. I didn't text anyone my whereabouts. The light dimmed outside as I finished the last bite. And as I sipped the last of my tea, I finally felt it, something I hadn't felt in decades. A sense of enough. Not abundance. Not scarcity. Just enough. Later that night, I went into each room with a candle. I lit one in Emma's old room and let it burn for 3 minutes. Then I extinguished it and whispered, "You're loved." I did the same in Adam and Rachel's room. Except I said, "You're free." Finally, I returned to my room, lit the last candle, and said, "And I'm still here." Then I climbed into bed and let the silence settle, not as a burden, but as a companion. The week after they left, the house began speaking differently. Not loudly, not in any voice I could mimic, but in small shifts, like the floorboards creaking under my step in new places or the echo of my footsteps sounding fuller in the hallway. Rooms breathed deeper. Light fell longer through the windows. It was as if the house had finally exhaled after holding tension in its beams for far too long. I stood in the entryway one morning, palms against the cool wall, and whispered, "You're safe now." I wasn't sure if I meant the house or myself, maybe both. That Sunday, I opened the garage. It had always been Adam's territory. Tools lined on pegboards, boxes stacked chaotically, the mower always positioned crooked. But now it was mine. I spent the morning sweeping out cobwebs and reorganizing what I could. I found an old workbench in the corner and cleaned it off with a rag and vinegar. There, among bolts and jars of mismatched screws, I found a dusty shoebox marked Mom's cards. Inside were birthday notes, old postcards, even a school picture of Emma clipped to a drawing that said, "My grandma is the strongest." I pressed the box to my chest. I wasn't sentimental often. I didn't cry when Adam left or when Rachel closed that bedroom door one last time. But this undid me. I sat on the floor, back against the garage wall, and cried. Not for the pain, not even for the betrayal, but for the pieces they'd forgotten to take. The remnants of love, tucked away in a dusty corner. Forgotten, maybe, but later that day, I went to the hardware store. The man behind the counter, Hank, I think his name was, smiled like he was seeing me for the first time, even though I'd lived here 15 years. "Need help with a project?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. "I'm reclaiming some space." He chuckled. "Best kind of renovation?" I bought paint, 2 gallons of sage green and brushes, gloves, and drop cloths. When he rang me up, he said, "What's the room?" "All of them." It took 4 days. I started with the hallway, then Emma's room, then mine. I moved furniture slowly, not because I was frail, but because I wanted to honor what stayed and what went. The sage green walls made everything feel fresher, like a second spring had arrived just for me. I filled the old family picture frames with photos from my youth, ones that had sat boxed up too long, me on the beach at 19. Me and Harold laughing over burnt toast in our first apartment. Me, in scrubs, holding a newborn Adam, wide-eyed and terrified. I let the woman I had been take up space again. By the 5th day, the house didn't feel like theirs anymore. It didn't feel like mine, either. It felt shared, by all my versions, by every chapter I'd in. And that, somehow, was the most comforting part. The following Monday, I got a letter in the mail, from Denver. Inside was a crayon, drawing and a short note. "Dear Grandma, I like our new house, but it doesn't smell like tomatoes, or pancakes, or you. Daddy says I can come visit in the summer. I'm bringing Mr. Floppy and my new journal so we can write stories again. Love, Emma. P.S. Please don't make new friends who are grandmas until I get back." I laughed aloud, an honest, unfiltered sound that startled the quiet. Then I walked to the kitchen, pinned the letter beside the calendar, and circled the date 2 months from now. I whispered, "I'll wait for you." That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of red wine, poured a single glass, sat on the back porch under the stars. No phone, no TV, no need to check in with anyone. Just me, the garden, and a sky so wide it made my worries feel politely small. I remembered something Pauline once told me: life gives us rooms we don't expect to live in. It's what we furnish them with that matters. And for once, I liked my furniture. Around midnight, I walked back into the house and paused in the doorway. I took a long look, walls softly glowing in the moonlight, the faint smell of paint still lingering, Emma's drawing on the fridge beside a magnet that read, "Not all storms come to disrupt." I thought of everything: the betrayal, the silence, the rage and restraint, the garden, the ledger, the letter, the girl who believed I was magic. And I whispered, like a final line in a long novel, "You didn't break me, you revealed me." Then I turned off the light. And the house, my house, rested with me.